The massive space station hung in orbit around a distant planet. Its metal halls stretched for miles in every direction. Inside the largest room, beings from across the galaxy had gathered for an emergency meeting. Some looked like giant insects, others like walking crystals, and some had no solid form at all. Elder Zix Thara stood at the center of the room. Her body was made of living crystal that glowed with soft blue light. She had lived for 50,000 years and had seen civilizations rise and fall like waves on a beach. Today, she brought a warning that made her ancient heart heavy with fear. "Fellow beings of the Galactic Council," she began, her voice echoing through every mind in the room. "I speak today about humanity. They are young, they are small, they have only left their home planet 300 years ago. But I must warn you all, never provoke them." A loud laugh came from the back of the room. Ambassador Krell stepped forward. He was 8 feet tall with thick armor covering his gray skin. His people, the Hegemony, controlled 14 star systems and had the strongest military in the galaxy. They had never lost a war. "You speak of humans as if they were dangerous," Krell said, his voice full of scorn. "They barely understand nuclear power. Their ships move slowly between stars. They have small colonies on just a few worlds. My people could destroy them in a single day." Other council members nodded in agreement. The humans seemed harmless. They traded peacefully with most species. Their technology was centuries behind the major powers. Their military was tiny compared to the great fleets of the galaxy. But Elder Zixathara had seen the old records. Deep in her people's memory banks lay fragments of data from the predecessor race. The predecessors had ruled the galaxy millions of years ago. They had technology that seemed like magic. They could move stars and create life itself. Then one day, they vanished. "Listen to me carefully," Zixthara said, her crystal form pulsing brighter. "The predecessors left records about creatures like humans. They called it the catalyst effect. When some species face total destruction, something inside them changes. They break the normal rules of growth and learning. They become something new in the space of days or weeks." She activated a hologram that filled the center of the room. Ancient text appeared in the air, written in the predecessor language. Most beings in the room could read the old tongue. "These records speak of a pattern," Zixthara continued. "Peaceful species that seem weak and harmless. Then something threatens their very existence. Suddenly, they develop impossible abilities. Their technology advances in ways that make no sense. They become unstoppable." Krell waved his hand dismissively. "Old stories and myths. The predecessors probably made up tales to scare their enemies. Even if such things were once possible, the universe has changed. Evolution follows clear rules now." "The predecessors thought the same thing," Zixthara replied sadly. "Their final message was recovered from a research station at the edge of space. It was just one word repeated 1,000 times. Sorry." The room fell silent for a moment, but then the practical concerns of politics took over. The humans had been expanding into territories that several major powers wanted to claim. The Centauri sector contained rich planets full of rare metals. 3 different species had claims to those worlds. "The humans cannot be allowed to take valuable territory from established powers," said Speaker Vorth of the Trade Federation. "They have no right to claim entire star systems when they contribute so little to galactic civilization. Their expansion threatens the balance of power," added General Mex of the warrior caste. "If we let young species grab whatever territory they want, chaos will follow." Elder Zixthara looked around the room and saw the same expression on every face. They had already decided what to do. The humans would be stopped. Force would be used if necessary. The warnings of the predecessors would be ignored once again. "You make a terrible mistake," she said quietly. "I have lived long enough to see this pattern before. The Vaxians thought they could easily defeat the Jektar Federation. The result was a war that burned through 12 systems. The Mollusk Empire believed the Crystal Dancers were too peaceful to resist occupation. 3 months later, the Empire no longer existed. Those were conflicts between advanced species, Krell argued. The humans have not shown any special abilities. They fight with simple weapons. Their ships are slow. Their defenses are weak. My third fleet alone could occupy all their colonies in a week. Zixthara's crystal form dimmed with sadness. She had failed to convince them. The cycle would repeat itself again. Another species would learn too late that some forces in the universe should never be awakened. "I will ask one more time," she said. "Do not attack humanity. Find another way to resolve territorial disputes. Trade with them. Negotiate with them. Threaten them if you must. But do not back them into a corner where they face extinction. Please." The council voted the next day. 47 members supported giving the hegemony permission to use force against human expansion. Only 3 voted against the measure. Elder Zixthara was one of them. As the meeting ended, Krell approached the ancient being with a victorious smile. "Your concern for the humans is touching but misplaced. In 6 months, this problem will be solved. The humans will learn their proper place in the galaxy." Zixthara looked at the warrior with eyes that had witnessed the birth and death of stars. "I hope you are right, Ambassador Krell. For all our sakes, I truly hope you are right." But deep in her ancient memory, she could hear the echo of that final predecessor message. "Sorry, sorry, sorry." The word repeated endlessly, a warning across millions of years that no one would hear. 3 days later, the hegemony's third fleet left their home ports. 300 warships loaded with advanced weapons headed toward human space. Their orders were simple: force the humans to abandon all colonies beyond their home system. Use whatever force necessary to ensure compliance. War Marshal Dorak commanded the fleet from his flagship. He had never lost a battle. His crew was the best trained in the hegemony military. His ships carried weapons that could crack planets in half. As they entered hyperspace toward human territory, Dorak felt confident that this would be the easiest campaign of his career. The humans would see his fleet and surrender immediately. No one was foolish enough to fight against such overwhelming odds. He had no way of knowing that he was about to become part of a very old and very dangerous pattern. Captain Sarah Chen was having her morning coffee when the long-range sensors picked up the incoming fleet. She set down her cup and looked at the display screen on the bridge of the UES Defiance. 300 red dots were moving toward human space at high speed. "That's a lot of ships," said Lieutenant Kumar, her communications officer. "Should we send a message to Earth Command?" Sarah nodded, but she already knew what Earth Command would say. The human military had 12 defense platforms around Earth, and maybe 30 ships total. Most of those ships were science vessels like the Defiance, not warships. Against 300 enemy vessels, Earth's military could do nothing except die bravely. The message from War Marshal Dorak arrived 2 hours later. It was broadcast on all frequencies, so every human ship and colony would receive it. The translation was clear and simple. "Attention, human settlements," the message began. "You have 72 hours to withdraw from all territories beyond your home system. This includes all colonies, research stations, and military outposts. Any human presence outside the Sol system after this deadline will be considered an act of war. You have been warned." Sarah read the message 3 times. Then she activated the ship's communication system and sent her reply on the same frequency the ultimatum had used. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Ship Defiance," she said. "Humanity doesn't surrender its children's future to bullies. Our colonies are home to millions of people who have built new lives among the stars. We will not abandon them because you want what we have built. If you want a war, you'll get one." Her crew of 43 people looked at her with expressions that mixed fear and pride. They all knew the odds. Everyone in human space knew how small and weak their military was compared to the major galactic powers. But Sarah's words spoke for all humanity. They would not run. The first attack came 18 hours later. The research station on Kepler 438b sent out a desperate distress signal before the transmission cut off. Dr. Elena Rodriguez and her team of xenoarchaeologists had been studying ruins left behind by an ancient civilization. The station had no weapons and no shields. The hegemony destroyed it in minutes. News of the attack spread through human space like wildfire. The Wolf 359 mining colony was hit next, then the agricultural settlement on Ross 128. Each time, the pattern was the same. The hegemony ships would arrive without warning. They would demand immediate surrender. When the humans refused, they would turn entire worlds into radioactive ash. Sarah and her crew were racing toward Wolf 359 when they got the call from the colony administrator. "Captain Chen, we have 15,000 civilians here. Our evacuation ships can only carry 5,000. We need help." "We're coming," Sarah replied. "Start loading the evacuation ships. We'll buy you as much time as we can." The Defiance was a science vessel, not a warship. It had light shields and a few defensive weapons meant for dealing with space debris or hostile wildlife. Against the hegemony's heavy cruisers, it stood no chance. But Sarah and her crew knew they had to try. The battle was brief and hopeless. 3 hegemony warships waited in orbit around Wolf 359. The Defiance managed to destroy one of them by ramming it at full speed after their weapons proved useless. Sarah's final transmission reached the evacuation ships as her vessel broke apart. "Tell them we bought time," she said. "Tell them we held the line." The evacuation ships escaped with 10,000 people. 5,000 colonists died when the hegemony bombarded the planet's surface. By the end of the week, 7 human colonies had been destroyed. Millions of people were dead. But something strange began happening on Earth and the remaining human worlds. Dr. Marcus Webb, monitoring quantum fluctuations from Luna Station, was the first to notice the anomalous readings. The local space-time around Earth was starting to change in ways that made no scientific sense. "The quantum fields are aligning," he reported to his supervisor. "It's like space itself is responding to something." "But I don't know what." Similar reports came in from across human space. Gravitational sensors were picking up impossible readings. Electromagnetic fields were shifting without any identifiable cause. Most strange of all, human beings were beginning to display capabilities that shouldn't exist. Dr. Amara Singh was a respected physicist at the University of Mumbai. She had spent 20 years trying to achieve stable fusion at room temperature. Every attempt had failed. But 3 days after news of the massacred colonies reached Earth, she achieved fusion in her basement laboratory, using materials from a hardware store. When questioned about her breakthrough, Dr. Singh couldn't explain how she had done it. "The equations just appeared in my mind," she said. "I knew exactly what to do, even though it should be impossible." Similar stories emerged from around the globe. 12-year-old Kevin Martinez solved unified field equations while hiding in his school's bomb shelter during an air raid drill. He had no advanced physics training, but his work was flawless. Construction worker Miguel Santos designed antimatter containment systems using only intuition and scrap materials. His designs worked perfectly, despite violating several laws of physics. The pattern was consistent across human space. Ordinary people with no special training were making breakthrough discoveries that should have taken decades of research. Farmers were designing faster-than-light communication systems. Artists were composing mathematical theorems that opened new dimensions in space. Children were building force field generators from toys and household items. Dr. Webb watched the readings from his laboratory and felt a chill run down his spine. The quantum fluctuations were growing stronger. Whatever was happening to humanity was accelerating. The collective grief and rage of billions of humans seemed to be manifesting as measurable changes in the fabric of reality itself. On Earth, military leaders were frantically trying to organize a defense. Admiral Thompson of Earth Defense Command looked at the tactical displays and shook her head. Even if every strange invention from the last week actually works, we still don't have enough time. The hegemony fleet will be here in 48 hours. But across the human colonies, impossible things continued to happen. Dr. James Park, a marine biologist on Tau Ceti, created a device that could manipulate matter at the atomic level. He built it using algae samples and discarded computer parts. When tested, it worked perfectly. Maria Gonzalez, an engineer on Proxima Centauri, designed a propulsion system that folded space-time. She had never studied theoretical physics, but the design came to her in a dream. A prototype built from salvaged ship components achieved faster-than-light travel on the first test. The most disturbing aspect of these developments was how natural they felt to the humans involved. None of them could explain their sudden abilities, but they all described the same sensation. The knowledge simply appeared in their minds, as if it had always been there waiting to be discovered. Elder Zixithara, monitoring events from her ship at the edge of the galaxy, recognized the signs immediately. The catalyst effect had begun. She had seen fragments of this pattern in the ancient predecessor records, but never the full manifestation. Humanity was accessing some collective potential that transformed individual desperation into species-wide transcendence. She sent an urgent message to the Galactic Council. The transformation has started. You must call off the attack immediately. If the hegemony continues their assault, they will face an enemy that no longer follows the normal rules of reality. But her warning came too late. War Marshal Dorak's fleet had already entered the Sol system. 300 heavily armed warships dropped out of hyperspace near the orbit of Pluto. Their sensors immediately detected Earth's pathetic defenses, 12 orbital platforms, and a handful of patrol vessels. Dorak smiled as he looked at the tactical display. This would be over quickly. The humans would surrender once they saw the overwhelming force arrayed against them. No species was foolish enough to fight a battle they could not possibly win. He ordered his fleet to move toward Earth at combat speed. In 6 hours, they would be in weapons range. The humans would have that long to consider surrender. If they chose to fight instead, Dorak would give them a quick, clean death. But something was happening on Earth that his sensors could not detect. In laboratories and workshops, in schools and homes, in underground shelters and orbital stations, human beings were accomplishing the impossible. Technologies that should have taken centuries to develop were appearing in the space of hours. The children were the most remarkable. 10-year-old Lisa Chen, no relation to the late Captain Sarah Chen, built a working faster-than-light communicator using parts from her toy robot and her mother's jewelry. 8-year-old Marcus Williams created a personal force field generator during arts and crafts time at school. Adults were changing too, but their transformations were more focused on immediate survival needs. Weapons appeared that could punch through any known armor. Shield generators materialized that could stop planet-killing energy beams. Ships began rolling off production lines that incorporated technologies no human had understood just days before. Within 72 hours of the first attack, humanity had advanced by centuries. The desperate need to protect their species had unlocked potential that had always existed but never been accessed. They were no longer the primitive civilization that the hegemony had targeted. As Dorak's fleet approached Earth, they were about to discover that their easy victory had become something very different. The humans they faced were no longer entirely human, at least not as the galaxy understood the term. The real war was about to begin, and for the first time in his long military career, War Marshal Dorak was about to face an enemy that could fight back. War Marshal Dorak stared at his sensor displays in confusion. 3 hours ago, his fleet had detected 12 primitive defense platforms orbiting Earth. Now his sensors showed hundreds of objects that made no sense. Ships were appearing in Earth's orbital shipyards faster than his computers could count them. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the humans have launched 47 vessels in the last hour, but according to our intelligence, they don't have the industrial capacity to build even one ship that quickly." Dorak frowned. Something was wrong with their sensor readings. No species could build ships that fast. It took months or years to construct a proper warship, even with advanced automation. The readings had to be some kind of sensor ghost or electronic warfare. "Prepare for attack," he ordered. "Whatever tricks the humans are playing, they can't change the fact that they're outnumbered 10-1. But down on Earth and across human space, the impossible was becoming routine. Dr. Elena Vasquez, formerly a literature professor, had designed a new type of fusion reactor using principles that combined poetry with quantum mechanics. When she tried to explain her work to other scientists, she could only say that the reactor felt right in ways that had nothing to do with traditional physics. The device worked perfectly. It produced clean energy at impossible efficiency rates. Within hours, identical reactors were being built across Earth by people who had never seen Dr. Vasquez's designs. The knowledge was spreading through humanity like a shared dream. Farmer John Mitchell in Kansas woke up one morning knowing exactly how to build a device that could manipulate gravitational fields. He used tractor parts, old computer components, and his grandfather's ham radio. The finished machine could lift his entire barn into the air and move it across his property like it weighed nothing. When government agents arrived to investigate, Mitchell couldn't explain how he had built the device. "The plans just appeared in my head," he told them, like remembering something I learned years ago but had forgotten. The same story was repeated millions of times across human space. People with no scientific training were creating technologies that violated known laws of physics. Children were building functional starships from playground equipment. Artists were composing mathematical formulas that opened doorways through space itself. Dr. Marcus Webb, still monitoring quantum fluctuations from Luna Station, watched in awe as his instruments recorded changes that should have been impossible. The space around Earth was being reshaped by human consciousness. Quantum fields were aligning in patterns that created new possibilities for matter and energy. "It's like reality itself is becoming more flexible," he reported to Earth Command. "The humans aren't just building impossible devices, they're changing the rules of what's possible." The military applications appeared first. Admiral Thompson watched in amazement as ordinary citizens delivered weapons and ships that surpassed anything in Earth's arsenal. A high school physics teacher named Robert Kim arrived at a military base carrying blueprints for a weapon that could fire dark matter projectiles. "I dreamed about it last night," Kim explained. "I woke up knowing exactly how to build it, even though I've never heard of dark matter weapons before." The device worked flawlessly. When tested against a derelict space station, the dark matter projectiles passed through conventional shields as if they didn't exist. The station simply vanished, converted into energy that scattered across 11 dimensions. Similar breakthroughs happened everywhere. A construction worker designed armor that could deflect any energy weapon. A kindergarten teacher created a communication system that sent messages instantly across any distance. A retired mechanic built a starship drive that folded space-time like origami. None of them could explain their knowledge. They all described the same experience, information appearing in their minds fully formed, as natural as breathing. The desperate need to protect their species had awakened abilities that seemed to come from outside normal reality. On the colony world of New Geneva, Dr. Sarah Okafor made the most disturbing discovery of all. She was studying the brain patterns of humans who had experienced these sudden insights. What she found challenged everything science knew about consciousness and evolution. The neural activity isn't coming from their individual brains, she reported to the Colonial Science Council. It's like they're accessing some kind of shared information source. Their minds are connecting to something vast and ancient. Her research suggested that human consciousness had always been linked to this source, but the connection had been dormant. The desperate circumstances had somehow activated pathways that allowed access to knowledge far beyond what any individual human could possess. Meanwhile, War Marshal Dorak's fleet continued its approach toward Earth. His sensors were now reporting that the humans had over 200 ships of unknown design. The energy readings from Earth's orbital shipyards suggested industrial activity that should have been impossible for any civilization. "Sir," his science officer reported nervously, "I'm detecting technologies that don't match any known physics. Some of these human vessels appear to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Others show energy signatures that suggest they're powered by controlled miniature universes." Dorak's confidence began to waver. He had fought many species across the galaxy, but he had never encountered technology that his scientists couldn't even understand. How could a primitive species develop such advanced capabilities in just a few days? He opened a communication channel to Hegemony Command. "This is War Marshal Dorak, requesting immediate reinforcement. The humans have deployed technologies that exceed our current understanding. I need additional fleets and our best scientific advisors." The reply came from Supreme Commander Vex, the highest military authority in the hegemony. "Reinforcements will arrive in 6 days. Until then, you have orders to proceed with the pacification of human space. Use whatever force necessary to complete your mission." Dorak closed the channel and looked at his tactical display. 6 days was an eternity in combat. If the humans could advance their technology this quickly, what would they be capable of in 6 more days? On Earth, the transformation was accelerating. Children who had built toys that defied gravity were now creating devices that could teleport objects across solar systems. Adults who had started with simple fusion reactors were designing engines that drew power directly from the quantum foam that underlied all reality. The most remarkable change was in the humans themselves. People reported feeling connected to something larger than themselves. Parents knew instantly when their children on distant colonies were in danger. Scientists could share complex theories without speaking a word. The boundaries between individual minds were becoming blurred. Elder Zix Thara watched the transformation from her position at the edge of the galaxy. Her ancient instruments detected changes in space-time that reminded her of the predecessor records. The humans were following the same pattern, but they were going further than anyone had before. She sent one final warning to the Galactic Council. "The humans have entered a state of collective transcendence. They are no longer bound by the normal rules of evolution or technological development. Whatever you do, do not allow the hegemony to continue their attack. You are about to awaken something that will change the galaxy forever." But her message was transmitted too late. War Marshal Dorak had already given the order to attack. His fleet opened fire on the human defenses with enough firepower to sterilize entire planets. What happened next would be remembered across the galaxy for millions of years to come. The first salvo from the hegemony fleet contained enough destructive power to crack a moon in half. Hundreds of energy beams and plasma torpedoes streaked toward Earth's orbital defenses. War Marshal Dorak expected to see the human platforms disappear in brilliant explosions. Instead, something impossible happened. The human defense grid simply absorbed the incoming fire. Energy beams that should have destroyed entire structures were somehow converted into harmless light. Plasma torpedoes passed through the human shields as if they were made of empty space. "Sir," his weapons officer reported with confusion in his voice, "all shots registered direct hits, but we're showing 0 damage to enemy targets." Dorak stared at the tactical display. His flagship's computers insisted that the human defenses had been destroyed, but his visual sensors showed them intact and unharmed. Either his targeting systems had malfunctioned across the entire fleet, or the humans had developed defensive technology beyond anything he had ever encountered. The human response came swiftly. A single vessel, barely larger than a civilian transport, separated from Earth's orbital defenses and accelerated toward the hegemony fleet. Dorak's tactical computers identified it as the UES Vengeance, a name that carried ominous implications. One ship against 300? Dorak laughed. These humans are brave but stupid. Concentrate all firepower on that vessel. 50 heavy cruisers turned their weapons toward the approaching human ship. The combined energy output should have vaporized anything smaller than a battle cruiser. But as the beams struck the UES Vengeance, the ship simply phased out of normal space. The weapons passed through empty void where the vessel had been. The Vengeance reappeared inside the hegemony formation, somehow having teleported past their shields and armor. Its weapons looked primitive compared to the massive guns on Dorak's dreadnoughts. But when the human ship fired, reality itself seemed to bend around its projectiles. The first shot struck the heavy cruiser Dominator. The ship's shields, rated to withstand stellar-level energy weapons, offered no protection at all. The projectile passed through the shields, through the armor, and through the ship itself. Where it passed, matter simply ceased to exist. The Dominator didn't explode, it just disappeared, leaving behind a perfectly spherical hole in space. "What kind of weapon was that?" Dorak demanded of his science officer. "Unknown, sir. Our sensors can't identify the physics involved. The projectile seems to exist in 11 dimensions simultaneously, allowing it to bypass any defense that exists in normal three-dimensional space." More human ships were launching from Earth's orbital yards. Each one demonstrated capabilities that violated everything the hegemony knew about space combat. The UES Retribution could phase through solid matter at will. The UES Defiant moved at speeds that should have turned its crew into paste from acceleration forces. The UES Guardian fired weapons that seemed to anticipate where enemy ships would be before they arrived. The hegemony's advanced computer systems tried to track and target the human vessels, but the ships seemed to exist in a state of quantum uncertainty, occupying multiple positions at once until the moment they chose to attack. Targeting computers designed to handle any known technology simply couldn't lock onto enemies that refused to follow normal physics. Worse yet, the human weapons adapted in real time to overcome any defense. When hegemony ships modified their shield frequencies, the human projectiles immediately adjusted to match. When they deployed reactive armor, the human energy beams shifted to frequencies that made the armor useless. Captain Lisa Rodriguez, piloting the UES Vengeance, couldn't explain how she knew exactly where to strike each enemy ship. The knowledge flowed through her mind like water, showing her weak points in armor and gaps in shields that shouldn't be visible to normal sensors. "It's like I can see through their hulls," she reported to Admiral Thompson. "I know where their reactors are, where their ammunition is stored, where their crew quarters are located. It's all just there in my head." The same phenomenon was happening throughout the human fleet. Pilots with years of experience found themselves performing maneuvers that should have been impossible. Engineers fresh out of training were making real-time modifications to their ships that improved performance beyond design specifications. War Marshal Dorak watched his fleet being dismantled by an enemy that should have been destroyed in the first minutes of combat. His ships were disappearing one by one, not through explosions but through transformation. Human weapons didn't just destroy their targets, they transformed matter in ways that left no debris behind. "Sir," his communications officer reported with panic in his voice, "I'm receiving reports from across the hegemony. The human populations in our labor camps have started manifesting the same abilities. They're walking through containment fields, they're reading our minds, they're predicting our orders before we give them." The implications struck Dvorak like a physical blow. The transformation wasn't limited to humans in their own space. Every human in the galaxy was connected to this impossible awakening. The millions of human slaves and prisoners throughout Hegemony territory were becoming unstoppable. On Hegemony Prime, the capital world of the Empire, panic was spreading through government facilities. Human servants who had worked quietly for decades suddenly demonstrated abilities that made them impossible to control. They walked through locked doors, disabled security systems with a touch, and seemed to know every secret the government had tried to hide. But the uprising wasn't violent. The humans didn't attack their former captors or seek revenge for years of oppression. They simply became free, and nothing the hegemony could do would change that freedom. Guards fired weapons at human prisoners only to watch the energy beams pass harmlessly through their targets. Security robots designed to contain any known species simply couldn't function when their targets existed in multiple dimensions. Admiral Thex, commander of the Home Defense Fleet, sent a desperate message to War Marshal Dvorak. "The situation here is beyond our control. The humans aren't fighting us. They're transcending us. Our weapons can't hurt them. Our barriers can't contain them. They're becoming something we can't even comprehend." Dvorak received the message as another of his heavy cruisers vanished under fire from a human vessel no larger than a fighter craft. His mighty Third Fleet, pride of the hegemony military, had been reduced to fewer than 50 ships in less than an hour of combat. He opened an emergency channel to Supreme Commander Vex. "Sir, I must report that the pacification mission has failed. The humans have demonstrated capabilities that exceed our ability to counter. I'm requesting permission to withdraw and regroup." The response came immediately. "Withdrawal is not authorized. You have the most powerful fleet in hegemony space. Use it to complete your mission." "Sir, you don't understand," Dvorak replied. "My ships are being destroyed by weapons that operate outside known physics. The humans are reading our tactical plans before we transmit them. They're anticipating our movements with impossible accuracy. This isn't a conventional military engagement anymore." Static filled the communication channel for a long moment. Then Supreme Commander Vex's voice returned, smaller and less confident than before. "What are you saying, War Marshal?" Dvorak looked at his tactical display, where human ships moved through space like living things, flowing around obstacles that existed in dimensions his sensors couldn't detect. "I'm saying that we're not fighting humans anymore, sir. We're fighting something that used to be human, but has become something else entirely, something we might not be able to defeat." As if to emphasize his point, the UES Guardian appeared directly in front of his flagship. The human vessel should have been a tiny speck compared to his massive dreadnought, but Dvorak could feel power radiating from the ship that made his skin crawl. It was like standing next to a star that had gained consciousness and learned to hate. A transmission came from the Guardian. "War Marshal Dvorak, this is Captain James Park of the United Earth Forces. You have one opportunity to withdraw your fleet and end this conflict. Choose wisely." Dvorak stared at the small human ship that somehow dwarfed his mighty dreadnought. For the first time in his long military career, he was facing an enemy that he knew he could not defeat. The question was whether his pride would let him admit it. 1 year later, the galaxy was a completely different place. Where the hegemony's mighty industrial worlds had once churned out weapons of war, now empty factories sat silent under alien suns. Not destroyed, not conquered, but simply abandoned as their purposes became meaningless in the new reality that humanity had created. Ambassador Lisa Chen, younger sister of the late Captain Sarah Chen, stood in the crystal city that humans had grown around Jupiter in just 6 months. The city existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously, its towers reaching through folded space to connect with similar structures on dozens of worlds across human territory. She was preparing to address the reformed Galactic Assembly, Every species in known space would hear her words simultaneously through methods that made traditional communication systems look like smoke signals. The message would reach their minds directly, translated not just into their languages, but into concepts their species could understand. "Fellow beings of the galaxy," she began, her words rippling through space-time itself. "1 year ago, your representatives made a choice that changed everything. You chose to threaten our survival, to demand that we abandon the homes our children had built among the stars. We want you to understand what your choice has created." On the observation deck of the assembly station, Elder Zixthara listened with ancient sadness. She had tried to warn them, but as always, the warning had come too late. The old galaxy was gone, replaced by something that even her 50,000-year memory could not fully comprehend. "We did not choose this transformation," Ambassador Chen continued. "You forced it upon us when you threatened to destroy everything we had built. We are no longer the species you attacked. We may no longer be entirely human as you once understood the term." To demonstrate their new capabilities, the humans offered a simple display. In seconds, 3 dead star systems at the edge of space blazed with new life. Dead worlds became gardens, their biospheres restored through methods that reversed entropy itself. Dyson spheres materialized around dying stars, constructed through controlled manipulation of quantum fields. The assembled delegates from hundreds of species watched in silence that mixed awe with terror. These were casual demonstrations of power that exceeded anything their greatest civilizations had achieved. The humans weren't showing off. They were simply illustrating that the rules of existence had fundamentally changed. "The transformation we experienced was not unique to our species," Ambassador Chen revealed. "Every civilization in the galaxy carries the same potential. The difference is that we were desperate enough to unlock it completely. Fear and love combined in the right proportions can break the barriers that limit what consciousness can achieve." War Marshal Dorak, one of the few hegemony officers to survive the conflict, sat in the detention section reserved for war criminals. But his guards were not keeping him imprisoned. They were protecting him from other species who blamed him for awakening something that could not be put back to sleep. The hegemony itself no longer existed as a military power. Not because it had been conquered, but because its member species had simply walked away. When your former slaves could move through walls and read your thoughts, when they could disable your weapons with a glance and heal decades of damage with a touch, the concept of empire became meaningless. "We are now guardians of a process that could elevate or destroy the galaxy," Ambassador Chen explained to the assembly. "The awakening we experienced could spread to any species under the right conditions, but it requires desperation combined with unity of purpose. Most civilizations never face circumstances that could trigger such a change." Elder Zixthara finally spoke, her crystal form pulsing with memories of ancient warnings ignored. "Your species has become something unprecedented. The predecessors achieved partial catalysis before they transcended physical existence entirely. You have gone beyond even their accomplishments while remaining in our reality." The truth was that humans now existed on multiple levels simultaneously. They maintained physical forms that could interact with normal matter, but their consciousness operated in dimensions that allowed them to perceive and manipulate the fundamental forces of existence. They could choose to appear as the simple, peaceful species they had once been, or reveal capabilities that dwarfed the achievements of entire galactic civilizations. "We offer each of you a choice," Ambassador Chen said. "Join us in transcendence, accepting the responsibilities and changes that come with such evolution, or continue your existence in the galaxy we now protect and nurture. We will not force anyone to change, but we also cannot pretend that the old limitations still apply." The implications were staggering. Species that had ruled through military might found their weapons useless against enemies who could exist outside normal space. Civilizations built on economic exploitation discovered that humans could transmute matter at will, making scarcity a choice rather than a law of nature. But the most profound change was in the nature of conflict itself. Wars became impossible when one side could read the minds of their enemies, predict their strategies, and neutralize their weapons before they were fired. The galaxy was forced to find new ways of resolving disputes, ways based on understanding rather than violence. Some species embraced the change. The Peaceful Traders Federation eagerly studied human techniques for matter manipulation, hoping to improve their manufacturing capabilities. The research collective sought to understand how consciousness could affect physical reality, opening new fields of science that had been considered fantasy. Others retreated into isolation. The warrior caste sealed their borders and refused all contact with humans, preferring their traditional ways to a universe where strength of arms meant nothing. Several minor empires simply disappeared, their populations fleeing to distant corners of the galaxy where they hoped human influence might not reach. But humanity's influence was not limited by distance or time. Children born after the transformation could communicate instantaneously across any distance. They could sense suffering on worlds they had never visited and provide help through methods that bypassed physical travel entirely. The galaxy was becoming connected in ways that made traditional concepts of space and borders meaningless. "The elders were right to caution against provoking us," said a human child, whose physical age was 7 but whose awareness spanned dimensions. Her words reached every consciousness in the assembly simultaneously. "They should have mentioned that we would thank you for it afterward." The statement carried layers of meaning that resonated differently for each species. For some, it was a reminder that growth often required pressure. For others, it was a warning that some potentials, once awakened, could never be controlled or contained. In the deep archives of the reformed Galactic Assembly, a new warning was being recorded for any civilizations that might emerge in the future. The text would be preserved in quantum crystals that would survive the death of stars. Never assume a species has reached its limits. Some potentials require the right pressure to achieve transcendence. Humanity taught us that desperation, properly applied, can forge something greater than gods from ordinary mortals. Proceed with infinite caution when threatening any species' survival. You may not survive their awakening. Elder Zixthara read the inscription and nodded her ancient approval. Perhaps future civilizations would be wiser than her own generation had been. Perhaps they would remember that the most dangerous enemies were often those who appeared weakest, and that the greatest transformations came from the deepest desperation. The galaxy had learned a lesson written in transformed reality itself. Never provoke a species unless you are prepared for them to become something magnificent and terrible. Humanity had accepted that challenge and emerged as something beyond everyone's imagination, including their own. The universe itself had been altered forever, and there was no going back.